Opening, the bloody summer in New York. In the summer of 1976, New York City, the beating heart of America, was suffocating in fear like never before. It wasn't just the sweltering heat, nor the economic crisis and the rising tide of crime. It was the arrival of a cold-blooded, mysterious killer who preyed on the innocent. He killed without hesitation, leaving bodies on quiet streets and spreading terror among millions. The press dubbed him the .44 caliber killer, but in his own letters he signed with a name that would chill the city to its core: Son of Sam. For more than a year, from July 1976 to July 1977, at least 6 people were murdered and 7 others wounded by his hand. The entire city plunged into darkness. Young women dyed their hair, couples avoided late-night outings, and fear seeped into every corner. The monster, named David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz, as known as Richard David Falco in 1953 in Brooklyn, New York, was abandoned by his biological mother at birth. He was later adopted by a Jewish couple, Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz, who gave him a new name and raised him with care. But beneath their affection, David carried a wound that never closed, the feeling of being unwanted, a scar that haunted him throughout his life. His childhood was steeped in loneliness. Neighbors recalled how he lashed out in sudden fits of rage, showed cruelty towards small animals, and developed a disturbing fascination with fire. At school, Berkowitz was the outcast, friendless, withdrawn, with a vacant stare that set him apart. The warning signs of a troubled mind were there, but they went unnoticed. At 18, Berkowitz enlisted in the US Army and was stationed in South Korea. Despite the rigid discipline of military life, he failed to adapt, plagued by the same isolation that had defined his youth. When he returned home, he took a job with the Postal Service, a monotonous, repetitive routine. Each day, he withdrew further into a world of delusion. In his journals, Berkowitz wrote of demonic whispers that commanded him. He believed a dark force had seized his mind, urging him to kill. It was during this time that the identity of Son of Sam began to form, a monstrous persona he would embrace to terrorize New York City. The first shot, July 1976. It was the summer of 1976 in New York City, a season remembered for its suffocating heat, a crippling financial crisis, and a city drowning in crime. On the night of July 29th in the Bronx, 2 young women tried to escape the tension of the city by spending time together. 18-year-old Donna Lauria and her best friend, 19-year-old Jody Valenti, had just returned from a party. Laughing and chatting, they parked Donna's car outside her home, where her parents were waiting upstairs. To them, it was just another summer night. To the city, it would soon become a night of horror. At around 1:30 a.m., a figure emerged from the shadows. He looked like an ordinary man, but the darkness concealed his face. He walked slowly toward the car, watching the 2 young women. Without a word, he pulled out a revolver, sleek, cold, and deadly. In an instant, he raised the weapon and fired. The blast of the .44 caliber revolver shattered the silence of the street. Donna was struck in the chest. Her body collapsed against the seat. Life extinguished in seconds. Jody was hit in the thigh, bleeding but still conscious, paralyzed in shock. The gunman stepped back into the darkness and vanished as quickly as he had appeared, leaving behind a scene of chaos. Neighbors rushed out, hearing the shots. Donna's parents, horrified, ran downstairs to find their daughter lifeless in the front seat. Jody, trembling, tried to make sense of what had just happened. When the police arrived, they struggled to explain the crime. At first, it seemed random, maybe gang violence, maybe personal revenge. But there was no clear motive, no robbery, no sign of struggle, only shell casings from a .44 caliber revolver lying cold on the asphalt. The death of Donna Lauria might have been dismissed as another tragedy in a city already overwhelmed by violence. But it was more than that. It was the beginning, the opening shot of a killing spree that would terrorize New York for over a year. The killer's method was chilling in its simplicity. A sudden ambush, young female victims, the same weapon each time. It was the birth of a pattern. The signature of a predator who would soon be known by a name carved in fear, Son of Sam. The killing spree and the fear that consumed New York. Just months after the murder of Donna Lauria, the nightmare continued. On October 23, 1976, in Queens, young couple Carl Denaro, 20, and Rosemary Keenan, 18, sat in a parked car after a date. Suddenly, gunshots shattered the windows. Carl was struck in the head, blood streaming down his face, yet miraculously he survived. Rosemary fled in terror, while escaping death by inches. Once again, police found no clear motive, only the same .44 caliber shell casings. Less than a month later, on November 27th, two 18-year-old girls, Donna DeMazy and Joanne Lomino, were ambushed outside Joanne's home. A stranger approached, drew a gun, and fired. Joanne was hit in the spine and would never walk again. These back-to-back attacks delivered a chilling message. No one was safe, not even at their own doorstep. By early 1977, the terror escalated further. On January 30th, Christine Freund, 26, was shot dead while sitting in a car with her fiancé after a movie. In March, Virginia Voskerichian, 19, a Columbia University student, was gunned down just steps from her home. She tried to shield herself with a textbook, but the bullet tore straight through. The press began connecting the dots. Newspapers branded the killer the .44 caliber killer, and the nickname spread like wildfire. New Yorkers, already strained by economic crisis and rampant crime, now lived in paralyzing fear. The social impact was striking. Young women, especially brunettes with long hair, flocked to salons. They cut their hair short, dyed it blonde, desperate to avoid fitting the killer's profile. Couples abandoned late-night dates in parked cars. Parking lots, once filled with laughter and romance, turned into silent, ominous spaces. New York, the city that never sleeps, now trembled in the dark. Police deployed hundreds of officers across every borough. But Son of Sam moved like a phantom, appearing suddenly, vanishing without a trace, leaving only bodies and silence. To the people, he wasn't just a killer. He was the embodiment of darkness, terrorizing a city of more than 7 million souls. The Son of Sam letters. As the murders continued, New York lived in constant dread, but the horror reached an entirely new level when the killer decided to reveal himself. Not through his face, but through his words. On April 8, 1977, police discovered a strange letter left near the scene of a shooting. In it, the killer introduced a chilling new identity. Son of Sam. The letter was scrawled with distorted words, rambling thoughts, and deranged imagery. He spoke of a Father Sam, a demonic figure commanding him to kill. He warned that he would not stop, that more pain and death awaited the city. It was nothing less than a direct challenge to the police. The Son of Sam was no longer just a faceless murderer. He was now a villain in the spotlight, bold enough to treat killing as a twisted game. Soon after, he sent additional letters directly to newspapers, most notoriously to the Daily News. The second letter was even more disturbing. He described the joy of watching victims suffer and the demonic voices that haunted him. The New York press exploded. Son of Sam became a media sensation. Every morning, thousands of people lined up at newsstands just to read the killer's grotesque scribblings. Each letter, each bizarre sentence, was plastered across front pages as shocking headlines. But amid the media frenzy, fear escalated to hysteria. The people of New York were no longer just afraid of a cold-blooded killer. They now faced a murderer who craved recognition, who wanted the world's attention. Son of Sam didn't just want blood, he wanted infamy, a legacy of terror. For the police, the letters were both a clue and a nightmare. They contained no fingerprints, no DNA, only twisted handwriting that deepened the mystery. As one NYPD officer admitted, we weren't just hunting a killer, we were up against someone who knew how to manipulate an entire city. The investigation and capture of David Berkowitz. After a string of shootings, New York became a city consumed by fear. The NYPD formed a special task force called Operation Omega, deploying more than 300 officers full-time to hunt the son of Sam. Hundreds of thousands of people were questioned. Thousands of reports were filed, yet every lead ended in a dead end. The pressure was immense. Newspapers criticized the police daily, claiming they were powerless against a lone gunman. Residents lived in terror. Every creak in the night, every shadow on the street felt like the son of Sam lurking nearby. During the summer of 1977, the killer struck again. On July 26th, he murdered Stacy Moskowitz, a 20-year-old woman, in Brooklyn. And this would be his final killing, but it was also the case that finally cracked the investigation open. At the scene, a witness reported seeing a Ford Galaxy speeding away right after the gunshots. More importantly, police discovered a parking ticket issued to a car parked nearby. That ticket would become the most crucial clue in the entire case. The car belonged to a postal worker named David Berkowitz, living in Yonkers, north of New York City. At first, Berkowitz wasn't even a prime suspect. But when detectives dug into his background, disturbing details emerged. He had written threatening letters to neighbors and had been reported for vandalizing cars. On August 10, 1977, officers set up surveillance outside Berkowitz's apartment. When they examined his Ford Galaxy, they discovered a .44 caliber revolver, along with letters eerily similar to those sent to police and newspapers. The evidence was undeniable. That night, they waited. As Berkowitz stepped out of his building, officers closed in. Shockingly, he didn't resist. He simply smiled and said, "Well, you got me. I'm Sam." The year-long manhunt was finally over. New York breathed a sigh of relief, but the scars left by the son of Sam would remain, haunting the city for decades. The trial and sentencing. After his arrest, David Berkowitz stunned both police and the public with a bizarre explanation. He claimed he killed because a dog, his neighbor, Sam Carr's black Labrador, named Harvey, was possessed by a demon and had ordered him to murder. According to Berkowitz, the dog spoke to him, commanding him to kill. The story spread quickly, transforming into one of the darkest punchlines in New York's history. A man who had paralyzed 7 million people with fear was now insisting that he was merely obeying a dog. For many, it sounded insane. For others, it was infuriating, a cheap excuse from a cold-blooded killer. When Berkowitz appeared in court in 1978, psychiatrists were called to determine his state of mind. Despite his bizarre claims, they declared him mentally competent to stand trial. He knew right from wrong, and his crimes were deliberate. The trial became a spectacle. Courtrooms were packed with journalists, families of victims and curious citizens. Survivors testified, recounting nights of terror and lives shattered by random violence. Berkowitz sat quietly most of the time, but when he did react, it sent chills through the room. He often smirked, whispered to himself, or stared blankly into space, His lack of remorse infuriated victims' families who longed for even a shred of humanity in the man who had caused so much pain. Ultimately, Berkowitz was convicted of second-degree murder for 6 victims and sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms, ensuring he would never walk free again. The public's reaction was mixed: outrage at his emotionless demeanor, but relief that the phantom known as the Son of Sam was finally behind bars. Outside the courthouse, crowds cheered as the news broke. For the first time in over a year, New Yorkers felt the grip of fear begin to loosen. The city at last could breathe again. Public reaction and legacy. After the trial, the name Son of Sam became etched as one of New York's darkest memories. For more than a year, he had transformed the busiest city in America into a place consumed by fear. But the public did not stop at fear. They began asking deeper questions. How could an ordinary man, a postal worker, transform into a harbinger of death? And why did society only recognize the signs when it was already too late? Out of this case came new legislation, most notably the Son of Sam laws. These laws prohibited criminals from profiting by selling their crime stories to the media, publishers, or filmmakers, ensuring that the suffering of victims would never be turned into entertainment or blood money for their killers. Today, Berkowitz remains behind bars. From time to time, he writes letters claiming he has found God, attempting to show remorse. But to many, his words ring hollow, excuses whispered too late. The story of Son of Sam endures as a chilling reminder. Evil can hide within the most ordinary of men. And sometimes it takes only one person to terrorize an entire city.